And negotiations.
and negotiations issues. Minutes of this session will be made available to the public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists.
Do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
Whoop.
Give me a name.
Give it to Dino.
Dino, got it.
Thank you very much.
All in favor? Yay?
Yay.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, it is 7:01. We are in executive session. Thanks.
All right, good.
All right, 7:30, we are out of executive session. We are now in our regular session. And if we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, that'd be great.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, thank you. I guess before we get started, we did have the elections. Barb was on the ballot. Congratulations, Barb. There was another person, but not here. Next meeting, we have a special presentation from the Lakeview staff, which is going to be nice. I'll be wearing my Lakeview shirt, FYI, in advance. But tonight we have an audit presentation. Mr. Schroeder,
Good evening.
give us some good news.
Well, it's a little bit strange this year in that we don't have the books for you yet because the state, there's a new GASB.
There's a microphone there.
Oh,
Sorry.
There's a, is this on?
Just push that one button down for a second.
It's on.
There's a new GASB coming out that's generally accepted accounting standard that has to be added, that we're supposed to add in all long-term debt in relation to pension cost, which we have to get the numbers from the state, and the state didn't give us the numbers yet. So all 600 or 580 school districts or whatever, we're going to have to do them all in 3 weeks, if we even get it by then. So anyhow, what the long-term debt, though, affects, there's two different bases of accounting in this report. We never talk about that basis of accounting. That basis of accounting is the full accrual, the business model where we put in depreciation of fixed assets, long-term accrued compensated absences, any type of long-term liabilities. The state does not go by that. So what we decided with your financial administration is we would have this presentation tonight to talk about the basis of accounting that we do go by, because that will not change, and just so that we can keep this process moving. And then when we give you the audit books, as soon as we get the numbers, within 2 weeks, we'll have the audit books to you, and then we can accept the whole audit. So for what I handed out to you was a little boiled down recap of the change in the fund balance from the beginning to the end. The top section is the variances in the budget, the beginning balance plus the variances of the revenues and expenses to get to the ending balance. The middle section is the pots of money that we legally can put those balances into. And then the bottom paragraph, and I'm going to go over all these in a second, but the bottom paragraph is just where we talk about how those calculations are made. So at the top part, you can see that we went from an overall fund balance of $2,691,000 up to $3,506,000, an increase of $815,000 during the year. You had a great year financially. A large portion of that, or a significant portion of that, was that last year we took $1.5 million out and put it into your capital projects fund. We took it out of the capital reserve. Well, you didn't spend $434,000 of that, and you gave that back. So that came back into the fund balance. So over half of your $815,000 increase is the money we did not spend in the capital reserve account, and we replenished that account. Also, we lapsed or didn't spend close to $649,000 of the budget, and we had excess state aid of $101,000, and we got tuition above and beyond what we budgeted of $196,000. They were the major regenerators of the increase in the fund balance. So the middle section is where we're allowed to put the money, because the state has the rule that you're allowed to keep a minimum of 2% or of the current year's actual expenditures, or a minimum of $250,000. So for you, we spent $27,679,000, so 2%, we're allowed to have about $554,000 of unassigned fund balance. There are allowable adjustment to that of $101,000. We're allowed to increase. That was the state aid you got in at the end of the year. It's one of the few rules they don't jerk us around with, that they allow us to have a year to spend that money, so they add that to the unassigned fund balance. Anything above and beyond that we have in fund balance, if we don't put it into an allowed designated fund, that would be called excess surplus, which has to go back for property tax relief in the next year. But there are some allowable reserves, the main one being capital reserve, which you went from $762,000 up to $1,379,000. That was because of the $434,000 we put back in that I mentioned earlier, and you also transferred in $265,000 at the end of the year, and that's for future capital needs instead of going out for a referendum or that you can spend that money. We also have a maintenance reserve that went from $700,000 up to $815,000. And again, that's for non-recurring type capital items, so that we don't have to go for a referendum or because that's the only avenue we have to do major capital projects if they weren't foreseen at the time of the budget. We also, our current year excess surplus, which will be used for property tax relief, was about $300,000 this year. It was $218,000 last year. However, you also used about $78,000 of unassigned fund balance to balance the budget, last year's budget. So those two numbers combined come to about the same number. So the excess surplus you are using is consistent from year to year as property tax relief to balance the budget. And in my opinion, that's very important, because if that number keeps growing and then you have a year where you don't regenerate that excess surplus, you're in a world of hurt, because you can only go up 2% in taxes, so that there's not all that much room there, and that's offsetting all your inflationary increases anyhow. So I like to keep that excess surplus as low as possible, while obviously it's a great thing for property tax relief, but if we have spikes in that and we don't have the room for growth in the 2% calculation, you have to cut programs. So you really want to be consistent from year to year in that, which you have been in the last number of years. You've been very good with that. So overall, again, you had a very positive year. Financially, up $815,000 overall, while keeping the excess surplus where it should be. You have those chips to use for the capital reserve and the maintenance reserve. So it was a very good year financially. And even though you switched BAs again right near the end of the year, which usually is problematic, you had a great year. No comments or recommendations, highly unusual. It's a
I said that first time in my 11 years on board, I think there was not a single.
You know, Mariana, it's funny you say that. What is the first thing I said to you? I don't remember it ever having the same thing. I
If it
agree.
wasn't for us, lack of trying. No, she actually did a great job, and her predecessor, the transition apparently was seamless, at least from what we got. So your whole financial administration is to be commended. I don't recommend that as being a way of life, obviously. The consistency that is needed at that position, especially in the budgeting process, going from year to year, it's advantageous to have the same BA. And in my opinion, you got a good one now, so try to keep hold of it. So overall, it can't get much more positive than this. I always like to say you're as healthy as the state allows you to be with the unassigned fund balance. I mean, it looks like it is a large amount of money, but for a $29 million budget, $650,000 isn't that much wiggle room. So you have to maximize that as much as possible. But again, you had a great year. It doesn't get much better than this.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Schroeder and the work that he did?
No, thank you for coming in, and I'm sure doing a very thorough job, as always.
Thank you.
Anything else?
My staff, not me.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. If you have any recommendations on, since you talked about our excess surplus and our capital reserve and maintenance reserve, how much is, prudent to draw down at one swoop?
Well, that question is based on what your capital needs are. Your debt service, which is about $565,000 last year, is going to drop off in 2019, 2020. So what well-run districts do, or even desperate districts do, is they try to hold off so that one replaces the other, sometimes at the expense of capital improvements. If you have basic capital improvements, there's two schools of thought. saving that money and just to save it doesn't do any good. If you have the capital needs, obviously spend it. That's what it's there for. But replenishing it is not easy either. So you have to wisely use your resource. So if you do have some major capital projects coming up, though, as that debt service drops off, I always said, I've had districts where they might have had, say, making numbers up, $1 million of debt service. It dropped off for 2 years. They had it for 30 years. And then they went out for a referendum, it became $1 million, and nobody can afford it. So consistency, in my opinion, is always the name of the game in these situations, that if you do have those capital needs, that's what that money is there for.
Thank you. Any other questions? So thank you for the hard work your team does, and appreciate Maris and the work her team does. Good work. Thank you.
All right, have a good
Thanks.
night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, so that's the audit presentation. Sandy, you're up.
As we're doing
So the presentation tonight is the review of our local benchmark data from 2014-15. So this is not the NJASC and not the PARC data. This is just the data that we collect in-house to determine the progression of our students. An update, the PARC reports are now due out the last week of November. So we'll keep you posted. Eventually they're going to get here, and we'll let everyone know when they do. Okay, so one of the assessments that we use is called the STAR Reading Assessment, which measures reading comprehension. So I did a comparison. Boy, I have to get closer. Across the grades, what you'll see at the beginning of the year in blue compared to the end of the year in orange. So this is for 2014-15, the beginning of the year, our kindergarten started at a 50% and then went up to 100%. The benchmark for the reading assessment actually changes each quarter. So as the students learn more and become stronger readers, the benchmark actually increases. So this is the number of students, or the percentage of students that are meeting the benchmark. So they are staying at grade level. So a comparison from the year before, and this is a very interesting slide to point out, is that this is the year, 13-14 is the year that we started with our full day. So the students that were in the first grade, right here, did not have full day kindergarten. And coming into first grade, only 1% of them were at grade level reading. So the beginning of first grade reading, at the beginning of first grade. We only had 1% of our students actually reading at that level. But you take it a year later, after we put in place the the full year kindergarten, our first graders, 81%, is that what it says? Sorry. I don't have my glasses on. 81% were actually coming into first grade reading at a first grade level, so beginning of the year. We would expect that they'd be able to read at the beginning of the year of what a first grade should be able to do. So this is really a striking statistic that so many of our students actually came in prepared, as opposed to the year before when only 1% were. The Valley View comparison, they also take the reading assessment, so just looking at it from 13-14 to 14-15, we did see increases, pretty stable in 2014-15, beginning to the end. So the highlights, I did note that the high percentage going in that first grade year, we did see a large jump overall, an average of 14.8%. So remember the benchmark changes. It's not that the students just were reading better. It's that they were actually, as the benchmark got harder and harder throughout the school year, that the students were actually meeting that benchmark. And we had more students meeting the benchmark at the end of the year than at the beginning. So that's actual growth. If we had, let's say, 50% of the beginning of the year making the benchmark and 50% of at the end of the year, the benchmark changed. So that would just be that they're moving along steadily. The increase shows that they actually grew and went beyond where they were position-wise at the beginning of the year. We really saw very little discrepancy between Lakeview and Riverview. It was like 81% versus 82%. It was very, very similar. The notable increase with first grade, and I think that is due to the full-day kindergarten. I mean, there really is no other variable that could explain that, different at that. The recommendation, in the growth of sixth grade, we should see that moving at least steady, definitely not going down or growing, so that we need to do a comparison in January of our sixth to seventh graders this year to see if we are still having a trickle-off effect of growth. We need to see at least steady or higher in that. So we'll be doing that assessment again this January. We also collect writing prompt data. We collect 3 types of writing. One's literary essay, narrative writing, and research. Every grade level does different types of writing. The K through 2 do opinion and narrative. Those are the only 2 types that they do. So you can see at the beginning of the year, our kindergartners knew very little on narrative, which we would expect, and at the end of the year, they were making that benchmark. This benchmark does not change. So they start writing, and by the end of the year, they need to be at a certain place, and that's on grade level for kindergarten writing and narrative. Same with first and second grade. So you can see that each of them, very few students were actually coming into the grade level, being able to write at a full second grade level or full first grade level, but by the end of the year, they were making those leaps. This is narrative for our middle school, for elementary through 7th grade. Now, if you notice our numbers, like we have 54%, 41%, 52%, we looked at why we felt that the literary essay and the research were higher than our narrative this year. And one of them is that our teachers are very confident with scoring narrative pieces, and we do believe that they probably were scoring them much more detailed and really more strictly than they did the literary essay and the research, which they had just learned how to score and aren't as confident with. So I think that they actually pulled more things out of the narrative than they did in the other 2. We also spent a lot more time on research and literary essay because those were new types of writing for us. But I really don't think that our students are not writing to the narrative. I do think that our scoring was definitely more challenging. For opinion, and then here's the research simulation. So it looks as if they're writing stronger in research than they are in narrative, but I do think that probably the scoring, because we score this in-house, plays a part. There's a literary analysis and the recommendations. We did see that drop. I do think it has to do a bit with scoring. So we already have been spending this time this year going over the scoring and double scoring, making sure that everybody is clear on how to score those pieces. Our Envision Math benchmarks are content-driven. So these are all of the topics that students are supposed to cover in that grade level. The benchmark is a year-end benchmark, so students have a set number of math skills they're supposed to know by the end of the school year. They are measured on them in September, again in January, and then again at the end of the year. So we measure how far they are progressing. So at the beginning of the year, it's likely they wouldn't know a lot of the grade level topics. So it's not surprising that the numbers would be low, but where we really look is where are we ending? You know, we have very high numbers for our ending, that students are meeting the benchmark for the end of the year, content-wise. So high above average for all of the grade levels. The grade 3 was the lowest starting at, and again, I'm not totally surprised because that's when they start multiplication and a lot of those more complex topics like fractions. So they started pretty low, but then moved up to meeting grade level expectations. At Valley View, it was very interesting of how many were meeting the expectations at the beginning of the year, and then it was just consistent throughout, and really speaks to the need for us adding these advanced math courses that we've been adding, because many of the students already achieved the benchmark at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year. So these are students that now we've moved into our pre-algebra, our Algebra 1, and our geometry courses, and no longer take our traditional 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math classes.
So did they all get the same test, including those that were already in pre-algebra?
Yeah.
They all take the same, no, they weren't already in pre-algebra, but they were,
Let's say your seventh grader had advanced math in sixth grade, do they take the same benchmark as a kid that had regular math?
what is different about this, I'm sorry, I didn't clarify that. It is the case in elementary school. It is not the case in middle school because it's a star math, and so the benchmark changes. So the questions change as the student misses them or gets them right. They get harder if the student gets them right, and if they miss it, it gets easier. So although it's the same program, they will not be necessarily getting the same questions. So on this particular one, they're steady here.
Your questions are going to get harder as you get them right.
Right. So this particular slide shows that they were steady, not growth, right? Because they passed, 90% of them passed the benchmark at the beginning of the year, 90% of them passed the benchmark at the end of the year. But the benchmark changes.
Okay. So at the end, so is there a way to tell if at the end of the year, the same kid that scored well in regular math, that had trouble with the test and had the easier questions, then was able to answer the harder questions? Because that's where you're going to see the growth. Or else, to me, it doesn't look like these kids moved at all. What they learned, what they knew at the beginning of the year is the same material that they knew at the end of the year. Like, how do you?
It is different material and the score is different. So the benchmark score, so let's say they needed to meet the benchmark in September, they had to have a 600. To meet the benchmark in June, it was like 780. So,
Okay, so
There's a lot
how do
of
we
movement.
depict that then? To understand what that.
with this particular slide, because on this test, you cannot say the end of the year, it's not the same benchmark. So this is not, all the other pieces I just showed you for Envision Math, it's end of the year benchmark, and that's why you see this. Very few kids meeting the benchmark at the beginning, many students meeting the benchmark at the end of the year. This tells you it's steady, meaning they are just steadily moving along with the material, but there's no big growth. And this one, at the end, indicates that they met the benchmark that was at the beginning of the year, but they did not reach the harder benchmark by the end of the year.
So, I don't
So
know.
I'm trying to, that's what I'm trying to understand is, what's the difference between the beginning of the year and the end of the year? Like what's?
Difference in the test?
Yes,
So,
it gets harder because you now learn that material. So now the questions are going to be over the material that you've just learned, like the first semester. So the questions that you had going into, let's say, September of sixth grade are going to be a lot of review questions of fifth grade, and maybe you know a little bit of sixth grade material, but you won't know a lot, so you won't get passed. But then by the middle of sixth grade, you now have a semester of sixth grade material behind you. So you should be able to answer those questions you couldn't answer in September.
So if there's that, I guess that graph, what we're saying is the beginning of the year, they're meeting where they're supposed to be, and by the end of the year, they're still meeting where they're supposed to be, although that meeting, that benchmark point is.
Correct. So all this is, it being steady is telling you that they are steadily growing all year long. They met the benchmark at the beginning of the year. They met the benchmark that went up, but they increased in the middle of the year.
What are we measuring at the beginning of the year really? What do those numbers really look like? Not just like a percentage, right? But
So-
as compared to what? Like,
Would the raw
to-
score help us? Show the raw score?
I was part of I sat with the teachers on when we first decided to buy the STAR program, and I think it's hard to understand that literally you can all be sitting there and each one will get different questions based on what you know.
Right.
The next question changes. If I keep getting it wrong, they get easier, and then they stop asking the questions.
Right, and that's reflected in your score, your raw score.
To get something out of this, and on top of what Carlos is trying to get at, what I'd like to understand is, and I'm less clear in sixth grade, but I know in seventh grade, in sixth grade, kids could have been in basically two different tracks, right? A higher math or a lower math.
Yes?
So as seventh graders in September, are they all, I know the questions change for every student, they start at the same point and go, but really, kids that had a higher math should have finished what would be for the, right? They're
It
really-
picks up wherever you left off.
So it's really hard to know if this 90% is because the kids really had that math the year before, so they should come in knowing it all, right?
Well, it picks up wherever you left off. So many of them left off in, you can't count sixth grade because it's the first time they've done it, but seventh grade. They left off already being beyond the seventh grade benchmark because they're really strong math students. So they already came in passing the benchmark.
Who were in the higher track of math in sixth grade when they finish, really we're finishing the end of 7th grade math, so they should come in and ace the 7th grade beginning of the year test, because they already
Yes.
took the whole year math.
Right. Well, 90% of them did. They came in, they met the benchmark. So wherever they left off, the benchmark.
Not for our presentation, but for when you're analyzing the data of how we're helping children move forward, can you look at those statistics separately?
We do, and if you remember last year, I presented it that way, but it really confused everyone because I showed you at a September benchmark, a January, and an end of the year, and you said, "Don't do it that way anymore. I only want to see end of the year."
I'm not even saying that. I'm saying for our in-house to make sure that we're serving the kids in our regular math programs and our advanced math programs. Can you look at them separately? The kids in the regular math programs, are they making, are the numbers being skewed by the kids that already took this year of math the year before?
That's interesting.
Is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, 90%, let's say that 100% of the kids that were in the advanced class probably are in that 90. And so the other, let's say that's 20 out of the 200 or 25 out of the 200 kids, so a sixth of it.
It's really skewed. the-
But we do look at it that way because the data that when I collect the raw data, it's by class. I don't do it by whole grade, I do it by class. So I know how pre-algebra did.
Our data-
Data analysis, Mr. Picatoli, yes, we have all that data.
that apart to make
Yep.
sure that both groups of kids are being served properly.
And because that's being used by the individual teacher, because they look at to see, it generates a report for each student, a prescription. Like, these are the skills they don't have, and these are the skills that they do. So when it pulls out that report.
That's the important thing to remember, because, and I had forgotten the piece, when I was in that sample group that did it, that's literally the key to it, is as it's happening, the teacher has the information to say they're struggling in this area, they've aced this, I don't have to waste any more time going over this, the whole class has it, but they're struggling here to help them move forward. So every teacher knows in the moment how to help move their students forward.
That is right. Yep.
September.
I mean, it's a very different test because there's no 100%. Like, no one can get 100%. It just keeps getting harder and harder and harder. I mean, we definitely have kids that are, they're already could do the 8th grade. And that's why we need these advanced programs, because on the benchmark, they can do a whole grade level before ahead, and they are. They're moving to the next grade level.
So, do we have any, because the questions get so much harder, it's not concerning to us that 8th graders, 95% of them come in knowing all of 8th grade math, and only 89% of them leave knowing all of 8th grade math?
Well, it is concerning that it's not 100%, because I would hope that 100% we're making the benchmark before we leave them off to high school, because this is really the last, it's not even 8th grade anymore.
That's the only time we actually drop, so is it even more concerning, or is it just because the questions are harder and it's probably the same amount of kids?
And does the 8th grade go beyond into 9th grade and?
Well, there are many 8th graders that do go into 9th grade, because once they get to high school, they aren't taking general math anymore. They're taking algebra specific.
Testing problems had something to do with that for last year?
You mean as far, it might have. I mean, this is the end of the year. 8th grade was a little challenging in June on testing. Yeah, but I always look at this to see. I would say 8th grade is definitely the hardest, because by the time they leave 8th grade, we expect that every student is prepared to take Algebra 1. So some of them already took Algebra 1, but others should have covered all the 8th grade material, and some have not met the benchmark to be successful in Algebra 1.
The nice thing about this is that over the years, we've always seen a drop in the 7th grade, and
But that's on Park, not on.
On NJ Ask, yeah.
It was on NJS. The first time we started getting STAR Math, the discrepancy wasn't there in the STAR Math, and we said, okay, now we really don't understand the data.
Okay, all right.
I guess one of the other things too, Sandy, that we did was making those department meetings up here with the supervisor. So that they can sit as a team of math teachers with a math supervisor. We used our staff from the district, and they can dissect some of this data and have these kinds of conversations to move that.
I mean, we're offering so many math courses now that it's just a very different picture. It's no longer 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math, because you have kids in pre-algebra, you have an algebra, and you have geometry, and then you have advanced for every level, as well as traditional 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math. So it's challenging, because the kids are not, it would be challenging to give them just one particular test, because they're all in different places in math. And this reflects as they move into the high school, and they have, by junior year, they have 11 choices of math. The kids start going on different math paths at this point. And then the last piece we take is the fact fluency, which is again under math, but this is how fluent they are, the amount of questions they can answer in a certain amount of time, spending less than 3 seconds per problem. So they're bringing it from their long-term memory, not from computation skills. So at the beginning of the year, our kindergartners do 0 to 5, and then we noticed by the end of the year, this number of students actually accomplished that. I still have my different schools on there, though. Now, if you look at first grade, we did look at this because kindergarten, the 0 to 5, we don't have a huge number of them all making it. We had 54% to 84% between the two schools. But if you look at by first grade, taking both of them together, they are 92% are proficient in their addition subtraction. So somewhere between kindergarten, and they didn't have that skill, and first grade, when it's the same, they're the same problems, it's now 0 to 10, they have picked up those skills. So I think it probably has to do with maturation, with developmental growth. I'm not really too worried about the kindergarten because here they have to do it again in first grade, and now they have it. So then we hit our multiplication and division. Multiplication is always stronger than our division, but you can see in every grade it went up, but in some grades more than others. Third grade is the first grade in which we actually introduce it. So I'm not surprised here that our numbers are really low. They just start learning this in third grade. And in fact, when they take the test in September, they haven't learned it unless they went beyond in second grade, and where our students are here. It is the same assessment in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. So what I'd like to see is that these orange to orange keeps moving up here, and yellow to yellow keeps moving up because it's the same problems. And they now have a whole nother year of practicing on these skills. And then we do it in sixth grade as well. So you can see here, that was something that I noted because here, same problems. Our students our division, it's at 77. And here we had them up at 80, in the 80s. So we can't seem to hold on to those multiplication division facts, and it's the same 0 through 10s, multiplication. It's something we have to continually revisit and revisit because it just needs practice. You can't let it go for a year.
Middle school, right? The next slide was middle school.
Yep.
Which when we started this whole fact fluency, that was what we were trying to fix.
It does.
Drop off in.
But I have to tell you that we didn't start out planning to do this, but what we realized was our sixth graders still didn't know their multiplication and division. Like, they knew it in fifth grade. It was the exact same test, the exact same time. Come to sixth grade, it's like, where did it go? So trying to get them to practice over the summer and keeping with it. And so we brought it back into sixth grade because sixth grade wasn't going to, they were moving on to another set of skills. And then we had to bring it back and still practice multiplication and division. By seventh grade, we switched to conversion, so it's a totally different assessment. We look at fractions, decimals, and then eighth grade, we look at square roots, cube roots, and so forth. So, yep.
Can you go back 2 slides real quick? So you're saying these are the same tests, third, fourth, and fifth?
Fourth, fifth, and sixth.
Not third that's on there?
Well, they don't take... They only take it half. They take addition subtraction at the beginning of the year, and they take it from January to June.
Okay.
So it's shorter time. But
Even
fourth,
looking at
fifth, and sixth.
Fourth and fifth, though, so when we look at 89% in multiplication in June, and then we look at the next year, that 89 to 65 is just
The
summer
summer
slide.
slide.
Well, these aren't the same kids. So I would have to do it longitudinally because this is our fourth grade kids to fifth grade kids. If it were the same group of kids and we saw them, we would say summer slide. But I first originally thought that, and then I went back and I'm like, wait, that's not the same kids. I can't make that comparison on this. And we didn't do it the year before, so I could do that for next year. But I couldn't, I didn't have that from the year before.
Year is probably more influential than any of these, because I think it's
Right.
hard to compare year to year. 'Cause they're
Different kids, yes.
But year to year, to me, that long-term data is huge to look at as they kind of go through the school system.
I agree. So right now, I only had some comparisons of 13, 14 of the data we actually collected. Now we've done this last year, and we're doing it again this year, so we'll have some data to compare it to. So, and we'll get in a rhythm of doing that. So our recommendation, I still had some concerns about that math fact fluency. We added double math 3 times a week to the elementary school. We added a fact fluency course in our Mastery Enrichment, which is an opportunity for students to sign up for different courses. And some students are in our Fact Fluency groups, our Math Whiz groups, that type of thing. And then, we just have to continue our focus on subtraction and division, because that's the one that seems to be the more challenging of that. But that's what we've changed for this year to address the numbers that you see here. Questions?
I question, 2 questions actually. These tests are timed. I know the kids get homework where they have drills in class where they're timed, so they can complete so many within them. So on this test, do we have statistics on how many questions were answered, and how many of those were wrong versus how many were not answered? The kids just didn't get to them. And that obviously would...
Right. If they don't get to it, it's counted wrong, because it's timed so that students could complete the assessment with 3 seconds per problem. So if 3 seconds per problem, it's drawing it from your, at least research shows that it draws from your long-term memory. If they can't complete it, then they're doing computation at that point, trying to figure it out other ways, using other strategies. So we pick up whether or not, if they know they can do the math, that would be under the Renaissance Star assessment, picks that up, or the Envision. This just picks up long-term retrieval. Do they know the facts like an alphabet? That's what this picks up.
So if it's blank, it's wrong,
Yes,
and if it's wrong, it's wrong.
yes.
So do we know how many are wrong, that were answered wrong versus how many were left blank?
I do not.
All right.
I don't have the
So,
data
and
on how many.
Recognizing everybody's a little bit different, and, maybe some kid, if they had 5 seconds or 6 seconds, could figure that out.
Yes,
But-
but that's
But
the
it's-
difference
it's-
she's
they're
talking about.
figuring it
Figuring it
out.
out versus you just have it memorized.
Boom.
Right.
Like 9 times 9 is 81. I didn't figure that out with all the fancy ways you can figure out the 9 times table. I just know. So that's the
Right.
difference. I know.
It's different, if it's different skills, and it's a small portion of what we do. I mean, it is a piece, because, it shows that once they get into harder math, it's easier if they know these, much easier, because it's the alphabet of math, but it's one piece on the report card. We only have one indicator out of the 8 or 9 indicators of math, because we do report out, are they able to add, are they able to subtract, can they recall it from long-term memory? So it's really different
That's
information.
important to a degree, but ultimately, you would hope they would know how to figure it out.
And we do measure both of those things. This is just one piece, right? Just the fluency piece.
You bring up a good point. So facts, knowing them in your memory, not knowing the ability to compute them, is part of our new report cards.
Yes,
How about, and so therefore these tests, they don't go into their grades because it's not that kind of thing. You either know it or you don't, right? The new
Correct.
report card. Are the Envision or Star Renaissance, and I may be getting the terms all mixed up, are they in students' grades or are they not?
they are. The data that's collected, because the report cards now have specific indicators. So on the Star Renaissance, it may provide information that a student knows, data analysis, can read charts. So then they're on grade level, so when we go to the report card and then there's one on problem solving or one on data analysis, then they get the M for meeting that standard.
Is that the only way or is it?
It's not the only one. You have to have at least 3 pieces of data that indicate that they know or they don't know that. For the fact fluency, it's whatever number they're at. I mean, right, they either are, they are not on grade level. And on grade level is 80%. So there's wiggle room. It doesn't mean they have to have 100, but they need to have at least 80% to be what we consider proficient enough. Questions?
I had one quick question as far as, and I think it has to go to, well, I don't know, I want to ask about the summer slot, maybe recently. I would imagine that it happens no matter what. And I know we're gathering the data to be able to say, yes, it does happen, or this is how much it happens. And I know that we instituted the summer reading. It was like a book, every we got a book. Are we looking into doing anything that's a little bit more robust to try to minimize that, so that when we do hit the new school year, that we're starting off at a higher point and we can go from there? Because I imagine that you're reteaching a lot of things in September, October, and maybe even a little bit longer.
Right, and that's really the goal of Common Core, is that you should be picking them up where they were and moving forward and not wasting, a month to 6 weeks. It assumes that they already do know it, and reading as well. Reading, we didn't see as big of slide, like students coming in at an independent level came in at about the independent level. What we didn't see was kids jumping over the summer. So they weren't progressing, whereas if they were in school for 3 months, they would have progressed past that, but we didn't see a big slide at least. The math, we see a slide in fact fluency. If they aren't practicing them, they forget them. That's the problem, which means it's just, and truly it means it's not in their long-term memory. So we just have to keep practicing, because probably if I asked you, any of you, I went, 7 times 8, most of you could go 56 instantly. We were like, drill, you drill. Oh, they always say that every year. I didn't learn it. And I'm like, really? You took the same test for 4 years in a row. But that is. And I'm looking at a few other things. We didn't have as many kids participate in the online math that I would have liked. So we're looking at some other options too. I mean, the intent is not to have them do dittos for the summer, but there's some other resources I'm looking at as well. I think the kindergartens apparently was too challenging. Okay.
Any other questions for Sandy?
Thank you.
All right, so reminder, at our next meeting, we'll be having a presentation from the Lakeview staff. Superintendent's comments.
Valley View Middle School boys soccer team was champions of the county in their division. They won the championship last Saturday. I thought that was a pretty cool thing. Last year they had a good team too. They lost in the final, and this year they were able to pull it through, so it was nice. I think I might have put this as a discussion item, so we can do that later. Strategic plan. Yes, so we'll move on to later. Computer Science Week will be December 7th through 13th, which includes the Hour of Code for 2015. We're going to discuss some of the activities for that tomorrow. And Board to Board is Thursday at Morris Knowles at 6:30. And I believe we need somebody as a substitute, if somebody can make it. Who's on the group for that?
I thought it was the three of us.
Dino, Mike, and I.
Oh, that's what it was, okay.
Yeah,
That's good.
I actually, if somebody else could make it, it's my only night I'm gonna be home this week. With my family.
What day again is it?
Thursday night,
If not, then I'll make it.
6:30.
I thought I had it in my calendar, but we'll check.
Well, I was just reading what Steve puts in the update.
That's fine. I'll check my calendar. I don't know
Okay.
if you can go or if someone else wants to go.
And that's it.
All right. Sandy, what do you got for us?
So you haven't heard enough from me. A couple things. The PASS meeting for the Common Core is this Wednesday night, 6:30 to 8 at Riverview. And it's the first of the year. The second one will be over the park reports, so interpreting the individual student scores, and that will be on December 2nd. And one I will share, that the article that was picked up regarding our high school offerings at the middle school somehow was picked up by the National Science Teachers Association. So a national journal published that Valley View School was offering. They were obviously doing an article looking at middle schools that were offering more advanced coursework, and now we're in that national journal. So it's pretty cool.
Pat on the back.
And
Awesome.
that's all. That concludes my report.
That's what I was waiting for. Now I know you're completed with your report. Thank you for doing that. Damaris, how are you?
Oh, great.
What do you got for us today?
You guys received the budget calendar timeline. We are in the beginning process of just putting together the budget. It's just the preliminary beginning. Please look at it. If you have any recommendations, any comments, any questions, please email me. This is my first year doing it in Denville, so I'm open for any suggestions. That's it.
That's it? Thank you. All right, it is now 8:13, and we will open for public comment. Feel free to step up to the microphone over there and name, address for the record.
Please, one at a time, though.
Form a line. 8:13, we'll close that portion. Old business, no action to be taken, though. Carlos, you want to tell us what we'll be doing at our next meeting?
Sure, at our next meeting, on the old business, we'll be approving treasurer for school monies, board secretary reports, student enrollment, HIB report, medical office, NJS science data, as well as minutes from previous meetings.
Thank you. And Dino, do you want to tell us what we're doing in personnel at our next meeting?
Sure. At our next meeting, we will be discussing item number 1, which includes items involving extra pay for certain staff members.
And probably some other things, I'm guessing.
Possibly.
Possibly, but that's how it's there now.
That's how it's there now.
All right. Just, I don't know, you trailed off. Are you, that's it?
No, that was all I have to say
Perfect,
on that.
good.
Including, the merit pay for the business administrator staff for that wonderful audit report.
Oh, that's right, they did a nice job. Michael, you want to go through what we'll be talking about at our next meeting?
Sure, instruction program at our next meeting will be moving forward some workshops with expenses, and then attachment A, which is the list of field trips, which is attached to the agenda. Thank you for attaching that.
All right. Barb, policies at our next meeting.
At our next meeting, we are going to vote for second reading and adoption, the policies listed on the agenda, 0132-6620, R8600, transportation pay to cash, and bylaw executive authority. And there's also one for first reading, physical examination.
I was gonna say, at the transportation meeting, we did discuss the physical examination regulation, which I believe is also attached in this packet today. And just so everyone knows, the only change from what we have right now is D3, which is in italics. If you don't remember that it's D3, it's in italics in the one. So we're adding that all drivers, I don't know, it doesn't need to say school bus drivers, it's just all drivers will be required to undergo a CDL physical examination annually. Right now we do it biannually? No, every other year,
Yes.
not twice a year.
This is a state thing though, right? Doesn't the state?
The state requires every 2 years, but we,
wanna
as
do
a
it
group,
more often.
decided
Oh,
to do it
good.
every
The
year.
district will be liable for the examination cost. So at our own expense, we, and the committee is recommending that we add this line. So that is what you'll see in italics is the only change from what we currently have.
Nice.
Hey, David, if you don't mind, I'd like to just like backtrack on the things on finance that we're going to be looking at.
We didn't get there yet.
We didn't get there yet.
Momentarily though. We'll get there.
So, on D3, should that say all school bus drivers? All drivers? I know it's under the examination of school bus drivers. The first D1 and D2 both say school bus drivers.
Well, and I don't know, should it also say school bus drivers employed by this district will be required to undergo a,
Yeah, I mean, it's.
just to keep
Just the way, yeah.
consistency?
Yeah.
Why do the other two single out that there are bus drivers?
All school bus drivers, okay.
I think that's a good idea to add in employed by the district. In case we outsource something,
Yeah, I think all school
We don't
bus
wanna be
drivers,
responsible
keep
for
it
what they
the
do.
language employed
The same as D1, school bus drivers employed by.
by this district. And then will be required.
Read it one more time, Mariana.
All school bus drivers employed by this district will be required to undergo a
I got it.
CDL physical and then assistance.
Got it.
Annually
Blah, blah,
reimbursed by
blah.
the BOE.
Yeah.
Got it.
So what does CDL stand for again?
Commercial
Commercial
driver's
driver's
license.
It shouldn't be all, it should just be school bus drivers employed by this district, just like the other two? Okay, we can get rid of them all, I'm fine with that.
Wow.
Keep it like the first one and two, school bus drivers.
Oh. The question is, should
Thank
1
you,
and 2
Mike.
have all?
What's that?
Should 1 and 2 have all rather than? Either
That
way.
was written by a lawyer, so they don't-
Some, maybe some, maybe. So that's policy. Any other parts on policy before moving on? And we move to finance. Barb, at our next meeting for finance. And I know we're gonna have a question from Don.
At our next meeting, we are looking to move and vote on 6 items as listed on your agenda. Discovery benefits, flex spending, roster of doctors, Alana, I can't say that, speech therapy consultant for observations, transportation sector consultants for annual GPS service. Rockaway Township, the contract with the Rockaway Township School District for $42.50 for cost of an aid for a student. And the report, which he just spoke of today, that we don't have finalized.
Right, so we should have
Probably
that.
will be tabled, I would think.
So are we going to accept the report as presented, or?
He said within 2 weeks we should have it. If we don't have it by next board meeting, we'll take it out.
Okay, so this may be taken.
Because it talks about the comprehensive part in the wording. That's what I was going to ask also. Don, did you have a question on this part?
Yes.
What do you got?
On number 3, with the speech therapy consultant, I was talking to the BA before we started. Apparently, this is a very specialized position where there's not too many people that can do it. That said, I'd like to see what she's charging us per hour. Because, my frame of reference is that we're going to get billed for travel time too. And we're going to get billed for the write-up. And she's going to perform an additional observation. So she's already performed one observation and we need a second one? Or this is an observation on top of something somebody else did?
This is on top of something she already did. So, this is the case that we discussed, one of the cases we discussed in the private session, where we had budgeted for a possible out-of-district placement. This is some of the things that we've been doing to try to prevent that. So, it's basically what I was telling you about before.
Yeah, okay. And of course, any litigation, ensuing litigation, okay. I just think it'd be good to know that it's not to exceed $1,000. It's a frame of reference what those type of services cost per hour. Hopefully it'll be underneath $1,000.
And that list of physicians and valuers, that's an important thing to have approved so that we have a baseline, because what you'll have is somebody will ask for a special, like some kind of a special evaluation, and there's people out there that might do it for $5,000, but if we have ours set at $1,000, they have to find somebody who does it for $1,000. That's why it's really important to have that.
Right, and I mean, in previous years, we always approve a list, but this is a much more comprehensive list than I remember ever seeing.
Okay, the second item I had is that the TSC contract, I guess that was started when Charlie was here, and, already passed the contractual start date. So I'm just, when I looked at this, I was wondering, the next time we take a look at this for the, it's too late now, but if some of those items could be done in-house
Can we just go over what it covers?
to reduce the expense. I mean, I saw, like at Denver University there, they do a lot of training, but I would think by now our bus drivers would have been trained and prepared on identifying bullying on the bus and all that kind of stuff.
I think by law, we have to do that every year.
Those trainings are every year. So this includes so it includes $25,000, $24,000 for the consulting fee, and then $14,000 for the GPS. So we are able, for example, just using last year, we saved more money working with them on these projects than we did in the consulting fee. So they give us better pricing on the GPS costs, on that Zonar that we did, due to the fact that they have thousands of buses and they have much bigger buying power. So the Denville University thing we have to do, that's part of the fee too. The whole consulting for this two-tier system that they're working on for us, it's all included in the fee. So this money's been budgeted, and it's also has saved us money.
So did we budget at this rate or at last year's rate?
Last year's rate, I believe.
So it's not a big difference, it's
No.
only like $3,000
Yeah.
more.
It's very
So we
similar.
budgeted very close to this amount.
We budgeted more than this amount for consulting fees and things, and this is gonna take over some of the other things we've used. We used TransFinder, which is another company, and this guy can do a lot of the things that all these other groups can do.
So just so we understand, they help us with our bus routes, they help us when we need to make repairs to buses?
Yep.
The GPS service, what is that?
That's, at any time, we can tell where any bus is with this GPS, with the global positioning.
So we have all our
system.
buses low-jacked, is that what it means?
No, it's called
Jack.
Zonar. The Zonar piece is, you remember one of the things that goes back years ago, I saw the reports, that's why I know it. There was an efficiency study done on the bus garage, and it found out that we have people getting paid a fairly high salary, in the 60s and 70s, doing things that aren't required of that level. So we had people pumping gas. We had people doing these checks where the mechanics were actually going around and doing these checks. So we switched to this other system, which is this thing called Zonar, and it basically is like one of those UPC guns and all these different tags around the buses. So you go around, check the tire, and there's a little tag, you scan it. And all this stuff, all the data goes into the mechanics, instead of the mechanics actually going around with paper for 27 buses and
It
saying,
was a
this
big
is
deal
good,
when we
this is good.
finally got that
Right.
system in for the
So
district. It made a huge difference.
We're seeing results in more efficiency and being able to do bigger, more important projects than having to do, things like this.
Just so people understand, because when you see GPS, you think,
It-
I don't know what you think.
Steve, I'm sorry I didn't ask this question earlier, but Safe Stop for All Parents. Do you know what that is? It's listed on here.
It's a presentation.
As part of
I'm a parent,
the,
I'd never heard of Safe Stop, so I'm just
as part of
wondering.
the academy, the Denville Academy?
No, it's listed, it's the last bullet point on the schedule of services under the NJ motor vehicle prep for inspection. It says Safe Stop for All Parents.
I'm not sure what that is. They do offer something that we don't take advantage of, and we could do it eventually. There's an app where the parents can actually see where the bus is at all times. We haven't really come to that yet, and that may be what it is.
Okay.
It's included in the cost.
Yeah.
I thought it was a professional development thing.
Safe Stop was?
I thought it was a
I can't
professional
find the
development
Schedule A,
thing.
because
Yeah,
I
it
thought
was. I mean, I
all
could
Schedule
Google
A
it. It says
is,
It's the
At
next
the
one.
very end of the contract.
Yeah, the last thing down here. Safe Stop.
It could be the app.
It's before.
But we can find
And I
that
think
again.
they, well, I think they
We're not voting on it
probably.
right
Yeah, yeah, it's not a big deal.
They probably come in and show them
I
how to do
apologize
it.
for not sending it earlier.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't even
oh yeah, you're right, it's
Our
not
attorneys
listed.
review these contracts, right? Before we sign them.
say again.
The original one. This one's just an up. It's the second one of the first one. So last year we did.
Well, there wasn't any changes on it, right?
No. It's
Maris's
nothing
name was
major,
thrown on
no.
there or something like that.
No, and
Yeah,
before
it is
you
that
sign
thing.
it,
It's that thing I was telling you about. It's that
The
app.
locator- It's the locator app.
Yeah, it's the app.
And then
So
they'll
we
come-
we
I
have- we
think
just
they'll come
haven't
and
gotten to
train
that.
'em.
We haven't gotten to the point where we have wanted to really spend the time and investigate this, but it actually is a
that
cost.
connects
The
back to
cost is
GPS?
passed on to the parent, believe it or not.
Parents
Parent buys.
subscribe.
Yeah,
It's
you
like
subscribe.
$19.99 a year apparently. You can
so
subscribe.
you can not have to wait at the bus stop on the first day of school for a long time, you can see where your bus
This
is.
is the
My bus is
greatest
5
idea.
miles
It's
away.
like saves me 3 minutes in cold out on the bus stop. This is
I don't think it's that real time, believe it or not, where you can be in your house and walk
No.
out. I think it's fairly close. It's not like it's, 1 foot off or something.
in Denville.
It could be within like 100 feet or something.
It says they're here, it says they're here.
It might be. It's more of a safety net, I think, where parents could say, I can see the bus
At
coming
least it's in the
down.
neighborhood. or
Yeah.
whatever.
Okay, so at the next meeting, we'll hopefully approve this contract, and by then you'll get it
An
fixed,
updated
an updated one?
Would it behoove us to lock in with a 2-year contract or agree with them? Would that get the price down? Push it anymore?
No, I don't think so, because we're in the middle of some big projects right now, and there may be a point where we don't need this anymore.
Okay.
Cool.
Steve, actually, one more question. On item number 5, is that a student that's going to Rockaway Township as an out-of-district placement? That we're just-
Already, correct,
Okay,
yeah.
yep, that's what I thought, thanks.
Mariana, at our next meeting for transportation.
Okay, at our next meeting for transportation, I will ask you all to approve the school bus emergency evacuation drill reports that are listed on the agenda.
Thank you. All right, Dino,
Yes.
you have some action to be taken in
Yes,
personnel?
I do. At this time, I would like to move under personnel, items 1 through 4, as listed on your agenda. Of note, we also have an addendum item on number 2, in addition of letter D, an additional position.
I'll second.
Any questions about this portion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Duarte?
Yes.
Mrs. DeLuna?
Yes.
Mr. Napoloni?
Yes. Michael?
Action for tonight, under B, instruction and program, item number 1, which is a resolution for the board to approve representatives from Google to visit Valley View on November 12th, demonstrate some of the kits that they use that are content aligned for us.
I'll second that.
Very nice.
I'll say, that's exciting when I read that.
It's cool.
That we get to be, right, part of a pioneer program?
Mr. Farber really has done a lot with this, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's very exciting.
Awesome. Any questions about this? Roll call.
Yeah, I got one.
All right.
I can figure out all the things they're talking about here, except for in Mr. Farber's class, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Machu Picchu.
Machu Picchu.
Machu Picchu.
There we go.
The settlement all the way up in the
That's
mountains.
it's in,
That's Peru.
It's,
okay.
what is it, like a mile high? It's,
Yeah.
It takes the air out of you, totally getting up
yeah.
there.
it's the Incas, right? It was the Incan settlement.
That I don't know, but I know it's really high
I think it
up.
was the Incas.
You can bus up there or hike up there, I know.
Yeah, you can take a train, there's a train you can take.
Oh, there's a train there
Yeah,
too?
and they pipe oxygen into your hotel rooms.
Get out of here.
Now it's very good.
That's pretty cool.
Just like the Maya ruins
Yeah.
in Peru.
No concerns with
That's the tribe.
virtual reality
That's-
headsets?
That's the tribe, that
What do you mean?
ruins they're gonna visit.
Yes.
Virtually,
Like
okay.
3D TV, you know, what it does with depth perception and the mind and the eyes and all the studies that are done.
Do I have any problem with it?
I'm just asking in general, if anybody.
I don't know if anybody's read any.
Are you stating you have an issue with it, or?
Well, he may have read something about
No,
it.
I'm just.
Yeah, no, I've heard that like all these virtual reality, 3D type things, you know, the way it stimulates the mind and kind of tricks it can have, you know, longer term effects on people, and that, like, things like 3D TVs are not necessarily good, which is probably why you haven't seen too many of them sell.
I thought it was because of content, but that's okay.
I think Marcus here, they had a virtual ritual beheading as part of the,
All right, roll call, please.
people were brutal back in the day.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Duarte?
Yes.
Mrs. DeLuna?
Yes.
Mr. Napoloni?
Yes, thank you. Barb, for finance, we got something to move here?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we vote on the resolution for the joint transportation agreement for Assumption School, Route ASP 02P between Denville Board of Ed and the Mendham Township Board of Ed for the 2015-16 school year at a cost of $9,489.37.
I'll second.
Second. We ended up doing this a few years ago, right? Didn't it save us like a ton of money?
I'm sorry?
Saved us, is this the one where we did something similar a few years ago and it saved us like a whole bunch of money, partnering with some district, right? Am I thinking of something
Well,
different?
we're partnering with Randolph right now.
This is the Mendham one too.
But this is an out of district for Mendham
Got it.
Township.
Any questions about this? Roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Capello?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindsay?
Yes.
Mr. Cass?
Yes.
Mr. Duarte?
Yes.
Mrs. DeLuna?
Yes.
Mr. Napoloni?
Yes. Any committee reports?
I'm happy to give one. I was gonna say, we didn't have the committee report thing up with our stuff. Transportation met the beginning of last week. We went over I guess you would call it the 360 report. What is it, what do you say? 180, 360? Report on the transportation, about the complaints and what went on with the start of the
postmortem.
school year. Oh, yeah, you call it postmortem. Somebody else here calls it something else. No? Okay. Debrief, whatever. So we went over that in committee
Might as well.
and found out that we had, I think, the total of 139 complaints. Some of them, there were adjustments made, some of them, no adjustments were made. And due to all the complaints, we added 4 or 5 stops back on for safety reasons. So that was part of that report. We discussed, as I mentioned before, in the policy section, the physical examination. And I guess we're about to do it in the discussion item, so I guess I can wait for that. We discussed what are the next steps to go towards two-tier busing? So should I just leave that for when we do that?
Let's give it a minute and then we'll jump into that. Yeah,
Yep, okay, so that's my report.
cool. Any other committee reports at all?
Yeah, I give a
Oh.
instruction program, sorry.
Yeah, good.
We had our committee meeting prior to this meeting. 3 topics we discussed. Park update, which Dr. Cullis mentioned earlier, that they pushed back the dates to the end of November, that we should be getting the park results. December 2nd is the Parent Academy for Park, so we're hoping to get them in time for that. And then that Dr. Cullis is working on presenting to all the teachers in the district just what the park and reports look like and interpreting them and making sure that they're able to answer questions for parents. Another subject we talked about was the mentoring fee, the $550 for new teachers. The fact that we discussed basically reimbursing as long as those teachers are going to re-sign for the following year. So we're going to reimburse those.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah, that way the mentors or mentees are not being out that $550. And then finally, we discussed, once again, the two-tier busing from an educational standpoint and an instructional program standpoint, the educational benefit. And I haven't gotten a chance to read them, but Dr. Cullis just sent us over some studies that show some benefit to the amount of sleep the students get and when they start the day for each one of the schools. So.
Well, we'll add that to the other
Good
part of it.
discussion.
We'll add that there, yeah. Don, you had a committee report as well?
Yes, and the written report is almost done. But we discussed the project list for 2016 and 17, and there's a lot of very important projects out there, but very expensive too. So, for example, in 2016, the priority ones came out to 1.9 million. So we need to finalize the how we're going to finance these. Of course, we'll take, a chunk of money out of the budget to do them as we do every year. And these projects were divided up into priority ones and a priority twos. So some of the priority twos weren't as essential, but one of the ones that's looming out there is the roof repair at Valley View and Lakeview. And that really just drives the condition of the whole building. If these roofs leak, it wrecks the walls, it wrecks the floors, it wrecks the ceiling tiles and everything else. So it's really important we keep on working on the roofs. And then the other thing we talked about was the upcoming demographic study, and I think November 18th, 6 p.m.
Second meeting.
Yeah, second meeting. So that's where we are with buildings and grounds.
Awesome.
That's a committee meeting, right? Not a full
Yeah.
board meeting?
Right. So after that one, hopefully we'll be able to get a recommendation, right, Don? Recommendation from the committee
Oh.
on the
That's the date.
other thing, on
What
the
date is that again?
board
November?
office, 18. Any other committee reports? Nope.
I might as well do finance because it was all the same with ops and transportation. There were 4 items on the agenda. We discussed that we are looking at the rate of spending. We will probably need to do a transfer into legal. Our budget was 55K, is that right? So we're looking that we may not have enough to finish the school year if we're going to do negotiations and other things. And then the items that were on tonight's agenda, the Jordan Transportation contract, the audit, and the great job. First time, no observations, and that was pretty impressive. And the merit pay for the office staff who are not under the contracts, they have their own working rule agreement. So, we unanimously recommended that they be considered for that in the next meeting.
Got it. Thank you. Any other committee reports? All right, no correspondence, discussion items. You want to run through the discussion items, Steve?
Sure. Policy 9180, that's the one where I gave you a comparison sheet of, because you asked me, I think Mike and I think Mariana too, asked me about what do you get basically. So I think the information was in there. Pretty much it says that,
It's very different.
yeah, one is just checks for the 2 national
Pedophile list, right?
sex offender list, and the other one includes other things. And when Mike asked a question too, and when I went to my office, I pulled up one for somebody that was disqualified. And then I wrote to you, like, that's why I put the quotes. We get back a letter saying that the above named candidate or, personnel has been disqualified or is not eligible to work due to a disqualifying conviction. That's what we get. It doesn't say what exactly it is. It just tells you that it's a disqualifying offense. And then there's a huge list of offenses according to what the NJDOE checks for compared to what our lobby guard system checks for. And then you asked a question about the false positives, and that was really just because two people had the same name.
I'm shocked at that though, because you're scanning your license, so weren't they looking at the license number?
I don't know.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have the same license number as somebody else, although somebody else named Michael Anderson might
But
have,
if it's a national list, it wouldn't use your license number, it would just use your name off of that scan bar, I guess? Because your driver's license wouldn't number.
but I mean, you've got
Yeah.
a lot of names.
Then they
there.
check, you could check further,
Gotta
like
be
the
something
address and things like
double
that.
check, yeah.
For the last 5
Otherwise-
social.
Probably got like
Otherwise,
10.
every single,
Michael
David
Anderson.
Napoloni or something.
Well, fortunately, there's
Because
not
of
many
your
of them out there.
background.
That's true, yeah.
Thank God for that.
I messed it up for those guys.
I've probably gotten about 10 messages since I've been here, and all 10 of them were, like
How
we
do you
knew who
determine
it
it's
was.
a false positive? In other words, okay, so I come back positive. I come back, hey, you're not allowed in. You call lobby guard?
No, you can go to like a couple other levels. Like you can check. In other words, this will say so and so with this address, and you see their address. And it's not that person.
Oh, so it comes back a
Yeah.
little
It's
not
report.
Denville.
A little
you
more,
go, oh.
yeah.
Gotcha, okay.
Like the guys in Oklahoma or something, and it happened. The parent's been in the school for 10 years, and this thing happened, and
Do we fix it so that next time they go to scan their license, not every single time going, no, I swear to God, I'm really good? I mean,
you know what?
it seems like frustrating to me that
I
lobby
know.
guard would have that kind of fault in it.
I don't think they fix. I think we fix it on our end. Like we already know that this one was okay.
But they're told to scan again.
Yeah, they all have to
They
scan
have to.
again.
So then they
You don't know
scan and it
something
comes
new
back.
happened, right?
It comes
Having a
back.
metal plate in your head.
It's like everything's going something.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, okay.
I know.
I swear I'm.
I know.
Okay.
So I guess the next question is, what do you do for those volunteers that you have coming in? Do you go with the more extensive one that costs us a lot, or
Yeah, that
do you
was
go
the
with the
whole
lobby
point.
guard?
Yeah.
Sure. The current policy states that they must undergo a criminal background check. It doesn't say how you do it. You could do it the way the recreation department does it in a much cheaper fashion. We do it the way, I
Direct
chose to
department.
do it the way, like direct department.
But we go right down to the Morpho track, same.
But you do it
It's the level of search they
one
get.
time.
Yeah, the one-time
But I
thing.
think in the long run for us, this will be the less expensive way.
Because they won't have to redo the
Because
expensive way
most
again.
people
next
start
year.
volunteering when their kids are young, and if they're gonna continue, they continue. Most people don't all of a sudden wake up, and suddenly go, oh, I got time now to.
Right.
The
So, I
rec
mean-
department requires it to be redone every 3 years.
Every 3 years.
So we wouldn't do that, we just,
We
No.
would have to do it like you'd have to do it, so somebody could have to have it done 3 times compared to 1 time, which would be more expensive on the long run.
Yeah.
If the rates,
But we could also do, like, if you're in 6th grade, you're only going to do the other version. The way we're doing it is definitely the most difficult to manage and the most expensive. But it's the only way that school districts do it. Like,
It should
this
be
is the
the
district
easiest
way.
to manage though, because if you get it done in kindergarten, you're not saying, okay, Mike, you're now in 2nd grade, now you gotta do it again. I mean, in the long run, it should
In the long
be.
run, it will be.
I think
yeah.
somehow we need a clearer message going forward, But right now, we have some people that did it the less expensive one-time snapshot way versus the continually updating way.
Yeah.
So once we get it so that everybody only gets the long-term one, then you can say to people, if you've already done it, you don't have to do it again for us.
Exactly.
Period.
and we just started doing it, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, and I mean,
Last
we've
year.
already,
Was it last year?
year was the
Two-
first year, so this is our 2nd year. We're over hopefully the biggest hump,
Of those big group of
Now it's
people.
just as new parents come in,
Make sure they do that one. yeah.
Starting next year, we should be over the hump. This year, because we added all the
the classroom
class parents
volunteer,
too.
class
Yeah.
parents, thank you.
So we should actually have a big hump this year again, and then the hump hopefully goes down.
So when this was brought up and we initially asked to look at this again, we wanted to make sure that the policy aligned with what the board felt was important. So now, I don't know, by straw poll, do we feel that the more extensive test is the correct thing that we want to be requiring of people, not just the license scan as they come in?
I mean, that's a good question. Do we
Because
have-
that's what the policy says.
Right, so right now, the question would be whether or not we want to continue following the policy.
Well,
Well, you could,
you know how I feel about that, but we need to change the
Our
policy to what we-
interpretation of the policy, yeah.
Yeah.
So is there any concern about how we're doing it right now, which is the more extensive background check?
So that's step number one, or question number one, and question number two is to make sure, because now we added classroom volunteers, is that in the verbiage? I mean, are we getting everybody checked that we feel is necessary to keep the kids safe?
And is it the right level of check?
Right, those are the things we have to decide, and then we either keep the policy as is or make it.
My other question is, can you, with the lobby guard, can you add on different searches or different databases that you look at or look for different things through their service? Right, because, look, to me, it's just as much of a danger as a strange person that we really have no knowledge of. At least with a town person, you kind of have an idea. But here we're giving somebody, they scan, it checks two simple things, and they can come in, and they're virtually unknown to us potentially.
Right, but so what are you saying, like when a person comes in to fix something or whatever, aren't we supposed to keep?
No, the vendors don't come in during school time, though.
Well, some do.
occasionally.
Occasionally?
Not
But
usually.
they're supposed to be accompanied by a staff member, aren't they?
Yes.
I think that's in either our
Well, we have, like-
policy or our procedure handbook.
I'll give you an example, like for the ESIP people, the Honeywell people, they come in, they're scanned, and then they go around. If they need help, they have help. If not, they're looking at the things they need to look at. These people are already, we know who they are prior to them coming, so it's not like a surprise visit. We know who their names are and and the company and the time they're coming. It's different than just a person showing up.
Yeah, but we don't know. It's not like they're all school teachers that have been, fingerprinted in their own districts.
We're school volunteers.
Right.
And the ESIP people are coming after school.
Okay, well, that's fine then. It's not contact with
They-
the majority of our kids.
They can be on the roofs and things like that while school's in session, but they're not in the buildings
building.
until then.
Okay, and so do we let any vendors in?
Well, yeah, I mean, like the milk delivery guy comes and, there's people like that, if
We
UPS,
don't even
things like that.
contract.
But
Yeah,
you're still
but they're in
walking
the
the
buildings,
building,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so that's the question on the table for the board, and everybody
They have
doesn't have
to
to
scan
answer
their
tonight.
license,
right? Yeah.
We have to decide if the majority of us feel comfortable with what we have, or if a majority of people feel like something needs to be tweaked or changed in the policy. So it's reflective of what we feel is the right level of security for the students.
Or can you contract for more services? in
Well,
the
I think right
churches?
now that
No,
that's a
I
very,
called them.
Lobby
That's
guard?
what they have, is the two,
Okay,
there's
so
two
that's-
national databases.
For lobby guard.
so there is nothing more we can pull out
No.
of. And is there any other company that does a license scan that gives you more than one?
There's a bunch of other companies, I don't
We
know whether
started
they
with a
do more.
different one to begin with.
Oh, yeah, we
They
switched
were in
it
the same
midway.
building as our, is
Board
Lobby Guard in
office.
the same building as our board office?
I don't think so.
No, it
So
was
we
the-
started with, or we were about to contract with, or
Yeah.
however it was, because I know we did a field trip to the
Yep.
office to see what they did. So I don't know if people feel like they'd like to see everybody who walks through the building with more security, then we might need to look into if another company.
I think there's a little bit of an evolution. I mean, it's all part of the security enhancements that we consistently make. And I know there's some things discussed about different enhancements to the buildings later on and things like that that may inhibit some of the things that you're talking about, who walks in and where and how and when. I mean, just to start sort of the conversation from my sort of perspective, I like the idea of being as detailed in the background check, even considering the cost, with those that are coming into the buildings on a consistent basis, like the room parents and things like that. Because I think that at the end of the day, we always talk about, one of our first priorities beyond the education of the children is
Actually, I
certainly
think it is
safe.
their safety.
Yeah. So from where I sit, I think it's the right thing to do. I wonder if we can have more enhancements with the lobby guards or similar. But for the policy and how we're sitting there, I'm comfortable with it.
Right now, it does have the room volunteers, the room parents.
It does not say that.
It doesn't say it that way. It says it as regular,
doesn't say
Well, that's
regularly
the thing that-
scheduled.
So even if we feel comfortable with what we have, that was the thing that we also need to clarify, right? It's the regular basis.
Right.
So,
There should probably be no.
Air
regular-
quotes.
Well, they're not even air quotes, they're real quotes, what is, without a definition.
to give you a little bit of a historical perspective and some more background on this, this policy was in effect prior to me coming here, but I don't believe it was being done. Like, I don't think that we did the fingerprinting. So to start this process, I contacted our lawyer to look at it and give me what his interpretation of a regular volunteer is. And a regular volunteer was a person who is on a schedule, meaning like it can't just be somebody showing up, on some type of a schedule that comes into the building a minimum of 5 times a year. So anybody that fits that criteria, that was the original interpretation. We did not, he did not originally see the class parents as a classroom volunteer. So that was discussion that we had for a while, and I started this thing where I meet with our PTA presidents from all 3 schools twice a year, and at that meeting, the PTA, all the people that were there, were overwhelmingly in support of us including the class parents. Even though it's more work for them and all that, but they felt like those people have a lot more contact with the kids than even a volunteer serving lunch. So that's where the actual interpretation came from. The policy, the way it's written right now, really would leave us to be able to do anything except for, I mean, I think you have to interpret what the scheduled part is, and you do that by listening to your attorney and talking to other people that are involved in writing these policies. So even though it's a fairly large expense, and it is a fairly large undertaking to get everybody to do this, and it's definitely an inconvenience for the people who are coming here and volunteering. If you're gonna do it, to me, this is the only way to do it. I don't think you can do it in any other way and still have this level of security that we have. And to tell you, being in 7 school districts, this district is very tight security-wise, and I also think that it's priority one. I mean, we talk about it at every administrative team meeting. There's always some kind of a discussion about security. We have the chief of police coming in January to go over this new ALICE system, and we're constantly talking about that. So we have all this stuff is always coming out for us. We're always talking about it and spending a lot of time on it and trying to make sure that we don't become complacent with it, because that's the big enemy there.
Okay, and I believe we support that as a board. I guess, when Mike and I brought this up to begin with, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you were just talking, part of it is, I don't think we wanted to have less security. We just wanted to make sure we were uniformly applying the rules that seem confusing. And there's definitely confusion when you hear the PTA presidents talk at PTA meetings about who needs to do what. There's confusion when we try and clear it up because we're not necessarily clear on it. So I think even if we keep it exactly the same, we need to make sure we, delineate better things so that going forward next year, that it's not as confusing for people if they need to get fingerprinted again or not. But when you were just speaking right now about why we think it's, and the PTA president said it was more important to have room parents than some lunch volunteers, and it wouldn't fall under this definition at all, I don't think, but it's the one-on-one, possibly unchaperoned contact time that room parents have, especially when they chaperone trips and things. You could
The
be
field
a
trip.
not
One-time
ever
deal.
regular scheduled person. Should that be included here? Those are the people that, escort kids when you're in large places into, bathrooms or whatever, Should they be included in this? You can't chaperone unless you've been fingerprinted for some other reason.
It's just, there has to come a point where it has to be
more
manageable too.
And is there
You
an
know, you have-
opportunity to share information with the town when they do background checks
No.
on coaches?
No opportunity for that. I've already talked to them about it, and their lawyer advised them not to do that. So we're
Because if
not
something
doing it.
happened and we relied
Right.
on theirs, that they'd be
Exactly.
liable.
Yep. So they're not gonna,
I know, it's Girl Scouts, the church, it's ridiculous. Like,
Between all
it
the
really
sports and everything
is
else,
oppressive, the new environment that we live in.
No, and I think that, so from my take, I agree with what Steve and Dave both said about the fact that the level of security is extremely important to everybody here. I asked my wife, who's a teacher in another district, what they do. They just sign in.
Yeah.
They don't have any scanning system or anything in their school, which is a large school district locally. I agree with Mariana that the issue, I think, comes down to how we implement this, because I stood up in front of the PTA and said, no, class parents don't have to be fingerprinted because you communicated with the PTA presidents, but we didn't know that. So they looked at me and said, no. So there was confusion on it. So I don't know if we can come up with a kind of a parent-facing document that says, hey, here's who we need to get fingerprinted. It doesn't have to be a policy, but just a procedure or something. And then screenshots on how to do it, who to call when they have questions of the district. Those are the type, they were asking for that when we spoke to the PTA. They were saying, can you give us something more? And I think some of that has been given out to the PTA presidents, but it's not getting out to the parents. So I don't know how to get that to the right people in their hands without shotgunning it out to everybody and then everybody thinking they have to get fingerprinted.
That was the problem the year
That
before.
was the problem the year
I know.
before, right, so we have to figure out the balance, and I don't know if there were lists of who already was done, so they could ask their PTA president if they somehow forgot that they went to MorphoTrack and got fingerprinted, I
Well,
don't know.
if we paid for it, we should have a record of it now.
Yeah, we have a record.
Did we
Yeah,
pay
but
for the
do
1
we
year?
want
There was a
the
bunch
phone
of people that
calls all
got 1
coming
year.
in?
Some
We
people
should-
didn't
we
do
should
it.
know based on the fee.
Some people didn't put in for
Right, and
reimbursement.
as I said, we went to APTA meeting at the next one in that school. They brought in both administrators to sit there and help parents log on and get their dates for the thing. But a parent actually stood up at that meeting and said, I didn't realize I already paid the big amount, and yet I just signed up again this year. So are we now going to pay twice because, they didn't remember that they,
I wonder if we could put together like a frequently asked questions type of thing.
yeah, and
A,
FAQ, who to call if you're not sure if you need to get re-fingerprinted, because in the long run, the expense will go down if we don't
Right.
double whatever, and it just felt a little
Yeah,
loose.
so that maybe
Sounds
the,
like the solution.
the messaging is,
Yeah,
I think you're right.
Type of the
But to your point,
Cheat.
we need to figure out something to do with kids on field trips.
chaperoning is more important than a bunch of people.
How often do we have chaperones that are not class parents? Because I know in our class, it's almost always the class parents.
No, but it's more than
Chaperone
one
trips in the
parent.
past.
I did too.
I have 2 in years.
Because
but
since I don't
wasn't
get to do
everyone
many other things, I usually try to go on a class trip
Same.
with them.
Yeah.
We also have some trips that happened before all this, like, early September. Trip goes somewhere, kids are walking to the firehouse or something. And we didn't have any of the stuff done yet.
Okay, but
I think if you get to the point where you're gonna just fingerprint people, anybody just going on a field trip, you're probably just gonna not take anybody other than people who've already been fingerprinted, because you're not gonna have the time to do it. By the time you know that the person's going on the field trip and, then you either have to be on the list
For
or
a sub
not.
to go on the trip, be a chaperone. It's
But
$100
field
for the
trips,
day.
you have
They've
paid
already been background checked, it's
employees
safe.
in charge. Like on a field trip, you have a paid employee tagged to be, like say the
Yeah, but
DC
you
trip.
split
Not
up
with
into small
everybody
groups.
at the
I'm in
same time.
charge of like 5 kids. When I went on
I was
to
gonna say, I
Turtleback
don't
Zoo
know-
with my son,
Right.
before I was on the board, I had 5 kids assigned to me, and I took those, we went wherever we wanted to
Yeah.
go. There was nobody else with me.
Bathroom, everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
same here, I was Turtleback Zoo, I was
Luckily,
in
I,
the museum in New
with
York.
Rutgers training and common sense and everything else, I never went into the bathroom alone with a kid. We all went together as a group.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's part of being the chaperone, you break up into small groups and you're responsible for them.
Something to investigate.
No, it's just,
The FAQ thing is important. I think something that
I
is
think that's
client-facing. I
great.
think
Yeah.
that's,
that could
Excellent idea.
Sure.
be kudos.
Done.
I'm happy you didn't lose any of them, by the way. Just on the side.
didn't lose any? Did you just drop the mic? I thought you just did. All right, board office, we're gonna wait for the November 18th meeting, right? Trailers is gonna go along with that.
Board office is the, 501 Opanaki.
Oh, that's what we're talking about, board office?
Keep it on there until it's finalized.
All right, so trailers,
Get
we're
the
waiting
check?
for the,
No, we should have it 30 days from the 26th, so.
sometimes close to the end of the
after
month. Strategic planning, you wanna go through that, Steve?
Yes, so strategic planning, there were some questions that came up. I think primarily, I'm not sure. I know Mariana had a couple questions, and I put out a special report to you. Does anybody have questions about what it is, why it's important, and the costs associated with it?
Say it again, which one are we talking about?
The strategic planning?
Planning.
I know you had some questions when I brought it up, and I wanted to make sure I put out something so you guys understood. It's a pretty involved process. It really wouldn't be something that you would want to have one person do by themselves, just so that it'll have the appearance of one person doing everything, and it's really about the community making decisions for the driver would be the driver of the district going forward. So Sandy and I interviewed 2 people, and I got a quote from a third. That guy happens to be really far away. And we really like the school boards, what they do a little bit of a shortened program, rather than having like a 3-day retreat where you have to get people to take 3 days off of work and be here. They do it in a little bit quicker manner. And we were just invited to be part of the same exact thing being done from the VOTEC, from the Morris County School of Technology, and Sandy and I are going to go to their meeting on Monday. It's their kickoff, their first one, to see how it is. It'll be the same person we would have, Charlene, who did the goal setting and all that. So
It's a 3-night format, correct?
it's a three 1.5 hours. Instead of that 3-day thing, it'll be 3 1.5 hour nights.
Well, I don't know anybody who did, but I know other districts that did the 3-day,
Yeah.
you do the first meeting, I forget what the,
Yep. So I have budget numbers and things like that will be presented at, at budget time. But I believe that this is the way to go for us.
are you making a recommendation right now?
No. There was questions about it, so I wanted to give everybody the opportunity after they were able to read through that long report I gave.
Eventually, you're going to make a recommendation between the 3 people.
Oh, yeah, we're going to make a recommendation for school
Right, but we're
boards,
not-
yeah.
Oh, you're at that point already?
Yeah, we're at
That's
that
what I'm
point. We've already talked to, I talked to 3 people. One was on the phone, and then Sandy and I met with one other person, and we're going to go see this other thing, unless we go and we really don't like it. But from right now, I've also talked to a couple other superintendents that used it, and they were very happy with it. So we're leaning very strongly towards the school board's version. It wasn't my original thing. My original one was to use the one that I had before and I was very comfortable with, but I think this one makes sense for us.
Good. 2-tier busing. Do you want to drive this one?
I can start this one.
Sure.
I mean, we discussed in committee, and as Mr. Forte's been saying, I don't know, on and off for the past year, right?
Yeah,
That
actually
we've been
from
investigating
October.
2-tier busing, and I'm not really sure where we want to start, but I think what we need, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, we need to get a feel for the board if they want to support this before we invest more time and effort into it. If we decide as a group we want to continue going forward, we did talk in committee about we'd like to publicize meetings with parents before we get much further down the road to explain to them some of the possible ramifications. Because when we discussed it in committee, it's going to be a significant departure, and I'm glad that Instruction and Program is looking at it from the how this will affect instruction directly on the students, indirectly on the students by what we'll be able to do with articulation with staff. All of those are very important factors. After being on the board this long and living through when we lost courtesy busing and everything else, the one thing that I know gets parents out is busing. And, I mean, we're talking about a possibility of, and I did actually write the numbers down, but I won't quote them here, like an 80% reduction in bus stops in order to move to 2-tier busing. So like, say we had, can't even do the math without pulling.
Say 100, to
What?
make it easy.
Yeah.
There was one that was like, it was 160 to 60. Pretty
Yeah,
much
like at
around
Valley View, right now we have 192 stops, and it'll go down to 60 stops. So just so, I mean, I think it's easy to say, yes, I want my kid to sleep in later, or no, I don't care, or whatever it is, but it's gonna impact everyone in some way, shape, or form, and how kids,
How much
what
does it depart
before
from the high
care,
school?
that I can't answer. Maybe that's a good
Say
thing to
again?
know.
How much does it depart from the high school stops?
I'm not sure, but they have a lot less stops than we do.
All right, so if.
Yeah, but they don't have kindergartners.
Yeah, they have a lot. The kids are older.
Come on,
I
that's not a
get-
fair
I get that,
comparison.
but if, you know what, if parents get in an uproar over
They're
bus
gonna
stops
drive their
versus
kids.
the education of their students, their priorities are wrong, and you guys shouldn't change your
No,
mind.
they'll
kindergartners
get,
aren't
they'll get in the car and they'll
I
drive.
agree with you, and that's what I said. I'm willing personally to take, a certain amount of heat if we can say, educationally, this is the right thing to do for X, Y, and Z, then that's fine. I just happen to know from serving on the board as long as I have, that it won't matter what our reasons are. They'll just be upset about whatever their convenience, their this, their that, whatever it is. And I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying, I want to make sure that every parent knows well in advance that this is what we're going to expend effort, time, funds. Eventually, if we move to 2-tier busing, it will save funds.
Right.
Significant funds. But we're not making the decision, as far as I'm aware,
No.
based on that. It's based on the education, the educational impact that it'll have on students would be the reason to make the decision. But I think we need to do, I personally would like to see if the board decides they want to go down that path, us do, you know, where we publicize it at the beginning of a meeting and we put it out in the Friday folder, come in and listen to possible changes that we're going to be working through, you know.
I actually plan to do like a tour in December, have a daytime meeting, have a nighttime meeting, and have a Saturday meeting.
Perfect.
Publicize it, put it in the newspaper, put it on that little sign downtown, everything we can, make sure as many people come out and then talk about it. One just clarification, the example you gave is the example I gave you. I just want to make sure everybody knows that's like the most extreme. So there's other versions. If we went from 180 to 60, you know, maybe we can go from 180 to 110. So we have to cut bus stops. You can't do this without cutting bus stops. If you think about it, just being realistic, I mean, just using common sense, if you're doing it in 3 trips and you're going to do it in 2, something has to give. Now, I just talked about this with Dino, and it's easy for me because I think about my own neighborhood. If we went to 1 bus stop for that, I think a lot of parents would probably not use the bus because it would be near your house, and some of the people live a lot closer to the school than they live to your house. So, but the problem is they're going to drive to Riverview. And if you drive to Riverview really can't handle like an influx of 4 times the amount of cars it has now. So these kinds of logistical concerns and the educational concerns need to be talked.
Too, right, where you're coming through Gardner Field instead and dropping off behind the school as opposed to.
There's a lot of
And I-
differences.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure, we can do that too, sure.
If we decide to move forward with it and we get to this December when you go on tour and all, maybe if what you're saying makes me think, maybe we'll have to get some kind of data on how many parents would switch to driving directly to the school, not just to the bus stop.
Right.
Because then that's going to be a whole nother level of something we're going to have to deal with and can our facilities handle.
So the only problem with that, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, the only problem with that is my guess would be, well, I don't know if I'm going to drive my kid unless I know where the change of bus
Yeah, you're
is.
right.
The times are going to affect it.
Well,
Or
yeah.
the times, too, right.
Let's say,
The
let's
weather.
say
I'll just drop my
most
kids
kids
off.
will have to walk between 100 yards and 400 yards. I don't know what it is, you know what I mean?
We don't know.
Would you make your kid walk that, or would you provide alternate transportation, you know?
Now, on the other hand, too, you have Dave. Dave drives your son because you want him to sleep a little longer.
Yeah.
Right? So now you probably won't have to anymore.
No, it'd be great. I can
Right.
get on the bus.
But
That's
the
the
time may
difference.
change,
And that might affect you in a negative
the
way.
bottom line is this is gonna it's gonna come down to how it affects every individual person. But I think the important thing is that if we're doing it for the reasons that we've talked about, which is educationally it's better, and Dr. Cullis is I'm gonna take a look through this stuff she sent over, and hopefully we could all take a look at it. And based upon her research, there's no doubt about it that sleeping longer and starting later are better for the middle school students. So, you know, if that's the case, then I think we need to start with that premise to begin with, and then we can kind of work from there. And every single person is going to look at it from a personal basis, and we're going to look at it, let's face it, we're already talking about it. We're not talking about, well, it's better for my kid. We're talking about, how's it going to affect me? It's going to be later, I got to go to work later, I got to affect my schedule. It's a personal thing for all of us, which I understand, because we all work, and we all have our own personal
Well, right,
lives and stuff. But
and we talked about in the transportation meeting that there are several different ways, like you just said, that this could roll out. Still being 2 tiers. Who gets to, which is the first tier? Is it the middle schoolers or is it the elementary schoolers? You know, which would be dramatically different. And I mean, it will affect program around what happens for parents, because like right now, if Lakeview were to move onto Riverview's schedule, Riverview offers before care and after care for parents because they start so late. And Lakeview doesn't, but I mean, you know, all things would be adjusted based on,
And I did have a conversation with the Y. They'd be interested in doing it for us. We also talked about possibly doing something at the middle school, too, if there was somebody that needed to drop their kid off. I don't think we should do it really early, but maybe like 30 minutes before.
I think there's a solution to those types of things that alleviate the personal concern, to your point. And I think what we're
Well, you
sort of
can't-
saying is those exact things, which are that the idea that we're totally transparent, number one, which is number one, the biggest thing. And the idea that we're starting with this focus on how it impacts our children rather than anything else. So let's put, you know, what my driving situation is aside and everything else associated with that, and focus on how this impacts my kids and the kids in this district.
yeah, that's, we have to
Yeah.
make a decision based on if it's educationally the right thing for the kids.
Right now, we have kids on the bus as early as 6:30 in the morning. If we did the middle school as the first school, the earliest kid would be on the bus at 7:30 in the morning. That's a fairly large difference. Another huge academic benefit would be the curricular horizontal articulation. Right now, one of the big things we hear about often is the differences between the two schools. But because of the contract and the staggered end times, we don't really have enough time to have meaningful meetings with both schools. So there would be an advantage for both of those. The disadvantages are going to all be in the area of convenience. I don't think there's anybody's going to say it's a bad thing to let kids sleep longer. I don't think anybody's going to say it's a bad thing for teachers to meet together with their colleagues across the district. It's just going to be, wow, my kid goes to this dance program. The dance thing starts at 3:30. Now he can't get there till 3:45. One of the things I'm going to say about that, though, and we talked about it before, is, if you own some kind of a business like that in Denville and your kids are from Denville, most likely you're going to do something to fix that.
You'll
But
adjust it.
the fact is, when you say December, that's for me, the important part. I don't want us making the decisions over the summer and the first time people
No,
make those
you're right.
changes. We need to
You're right.
make sure we're well in front of, so everybody, parents can plan, businesses in the area can plan, everybody can plan
So-
because it's a known entity.
So there's a lot, so I think we're hearing a lot of positives. Is there anybody who's negative to the idea of going down this sort of meaningful path of not just investigating, but expending time and resources and possibly funds towards,
Me,
you're against it, Don? Well, let's hear some opinion.
you're never gonna get my support on this.
Okay.
Let's just start with the middle school sleep. Why don't we have the kids go to bed earlier? The kid's tired, they can't get out of bed, have them go to bed half an hour earlier. What about the sleep disruption for the families? I know there's several on my street that have babies and toddlers that don't go to school. So they're gonna have to get that kid out of bed, into the car seat, on a snowy day, clean off the car, scrape the windshield, put the kindergarten kid or the first grader in the car and drive him to the bus stop, which is an 8-minute walk from my house, just the one bus stop up in Edgewood. I can't speak for the other bus stops, okay? And then in our neighborhood there, why drive to Edgewood? You may as well just go to Riverview and drop the kid off. Okay, so I know there'd be about five cars in my neighborhood that are gonna be driving the kids. It sounds like, a short walk for me and Parker. We did a brisk walk, our time it was about 8 minutes. But if you're dragging along, you've got a kid in a stroller and you've got your first grader, you're not gonna get to Edgewood in 8 minutes. It's gonna take maybe 15 or so. And on a bad day, you're gonna drive. So, the articulation, they're gonna have to drive from one school to the other to have the meeting. And, you get out around, lunch 3:30, 4 o'clock, traffic's pretty bad going from one side of town to the other. So, I don't see any compelling reasons. And, these studies, we're going to have the middle school kids, all their scores are going to go up because they get an extra sleep and get up later. Plus, we want to prepare them for high school. So what happens when high school's not going to be changing their time. They got to go early. So let them get used to getting up early.
Just
Yeah, but-
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
just
go
one thing on the high school thing, because people talk about that all the time. And Mariana, and maybe, I'm not sure if you know this yet or not, but the high school the middle school bus goes past my house probably 10 or 15 minutes before the high school bus goes.
I'd like to say that we should all stop worrying about what happens at our house, because for every one example,
No, I know.
You're gonna
the
have,
high school and the middle school bus at the stop by me, first of all, made, as far as I'm aware, the same amount of stops as we did because they picked up my next door neighbor at their house. And it was a race. One day, our
Okay.
bus came first, the next day, the other bus came first. It just depends on.
But it's not so much different, but.
I'm not talking about my house.
Oh.
That's what I mean, so we
don't have
shouldn't
kids,
worry, we can't
I'm
tell.
talking about 5 people in my neighborhood, all right? And you multiply it about all the other neighborhoods, it's a major disruption, and I really don't like to miss
and I have to
any
admit-
benefit, especially the sleep for the middle school kids.
I had not thought about what Don just said, honestly. If I recall being a mom, if my bus stop was a lot further, I had the little one that, because I could watch my kid at the bus stop and watch my infants, sleeping, to know that they weren't up and, climbing out of their crib or whatever, I could do both of those things. But once you move these bus stops really far and wide, it will impact in a bigger impact than we might imagine.
Well, I think,
What do we
Especially
have,
if
what do
we're
we
not
have to do
allowing
in terms of
sites.
busing today?
K to 3 to be at a bus stop without a parent.
What are we obligated to really do when it comes to busing?
Well,
Is there like a law that
Yes.
governs what we can do?
If you're above, if you're.
then we have those
Outside.
streets that you can't bus. Like,
Okay.
you don't want kids walking on 46, say.
Right,
Franklin.
but what about when
2
you're within
miles.
a certain proximity of the school?
Yes,
They're all-
within 2
miles.
miles, we
They're all
don't have to
hazardous
offer
routes.
busing.
We don't have to, so we do it today.
Unless-
It's a hazardous
It's a
route.
good benefit.
Wait,
Unless it's a hazardous route.
Unless it's a
Unless it's
hazardous
a ha-
route, and when
okay.
we lost the busing, and we asked the chief of police to come in, or the police department, however you want to look at it, to look at our routes, I think there's only 2 walking routes that are safe to the schools. There's only like 2 streets in the whole town.
Yeah, that's a good point, which I didn't mention when I was talking about these things. In my neighborhood there now, if it was a nice day, the kids wanted to walk to the bus stop, okay, you got to go up to Riverside Drive, that's a hazardous route, and Hinchman Avenue's a hazardous route. You know, I see the St. Clair's people, they're buzzing down that street, and Riverside's a racetrack sometimes, so, kids would be walking on streets with no sidewalks. And I don't know, I have to get out the paperwork, but there's a lot of other hazardous routes in town that we're having the parents and kids walk on to get to these revised bus stops. Very dangerous.
Well, no, actually, we talked about that in committee, and I believe what Mr. Forte said was, these reduction in stops take into effect that they can't cross any of the hazardous routes that are listed right now in our regulation.
We have a regulation that lists, what do you think, how many, 20, maybe?
12,
Well, there's some more, I think, yeah.
Oh, is Riverside Drive on there?
there's 27 of them listed.
Riverside Drive, I wouldn't want my kids, any kids walking, and parents, you know, you have a cluster
And no,
of 6 or
Riverside
8
Drive
people
is
walking
not.
up Riverside Drive early in the morning. Or home in the afternoon.
Oh, are they on the-
Dina, what are your thoughts?
I feel very strongly that the benefits outweigh any potential negatives. You look at all the analysis of, especially middle schoolers, their circadian rhythms change. They tend to stay up later. You're not going to put a 6th or 7th, 8th or 8th grade child to bed early just because you want to. They stay up later because of sports. They stay up later because of homework. They stay up later because their bodies are just telling them to. So, and then you're making them wake up earlier. So I don't see that. I frankly think that it's a huge benefit, both from an educational point of view and a public health point of view. Sandy gave a study showing that lack of sleep impacts obesity, impacts concentration, impacts higher learning, impacts impulse control. All of these things are impacted. And you don't get used to sleeping less. Nobody does. It's a myth. Lack of sleep impacts you, year over year, month after month, and it adds up. So I think there's a strong, compelling reason to really look at this seriously and to put the middle school on a later schedule. So that's how I feel.
And maybe if we're concerned about what happens at the high school level, maybe we start putting pressure as
Well-
parents of the kids that go to that district to get them to change
Right.
too.
And just because the high
Right,
school
we
start,
elect those officials, right?
and just because the high school starts earlier, I don't think we should penalize our kids 3 years earlier, saying, "Yeah, get used to it." I mean, I really disagree with that concept.
That's fair. I mean, so Barb, any
Well,
comments?
we had, with the 2 tiers, to Mariana's point, we still felt the Valley View should probably be the earlier one because of the sports. If you make it too late, now they can't compete after school, or, So, but it would still be, to Steve's point, at like 40 minutes, or, there's a savings, even if you leave them at the first tier.
Yeah.
With all due respect, I love sports, right? I mean, I coach many sports in town. I would not make my decision based on sports.
fair.
But just so you know, I think historically across this country, a lot of high school start times are based on kids getting A, after-school jobs, and B, being able to make after-school sports. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that make a lot of decisions based on sports,
I
and
don't,
you know,
but we
I'm
got,
not
so
one.
let's be the agent of change.
Chess club,
You know-
how's that, chess
You know,
club?
if
But-
you're talking about data, not to throw a monkey wrench in it, and especially considering I can't remember the name, but I recently went to a whole seminar given all about how to improve student outcomes. And one of the speakers wrote a book called Spark, which talks about actually bringing kids into school earlier in some districts. I think it's a district in Illinois, the town is eluding me right now, where they start with a 0 block, which is an hour before school starts, to do exercise, and actually the impact of exercise on education. In districts that are moving away, that are putting gym back in every day earlier on, that it actually impacts reading and math in tremendous ways. Districts across the board that have raised their test scores 17% above state averages when they were 15% below, just by bringing in a zero block. Kids who opt to come in earlier because they're learning more. So I'm not, for every study you find on one thing, you can find a study on another, and I don't know who's got the more compelling argument for maybe we should be looking at, bringing kids in earlier to
Have gym class?
have gym.
Well, that's with, right, and it is with, the study does have it with physical activity, because it includes that they should not start the cerebral activity until after 8:30. I mean, that's the time that the
Well-
American Association of Pediatrics says. And I would recommend, talked about in the committee, I would recommend that we actually have the middle school second, because if we're going to do that, if we're going to take the leap and actually do it for instructional reasons, the elementary research shows that they do better in the morning and get home earlier, and that the middle school starts later and ends, but it only ends at 3:23. The game doesn't start till 4, and the away games might be 4:15. I mean, we're not talking about changing the game till 5 o'clock. I mean, I really don't know what they do from 2:30 to 4 right now.
Might actually give parents a better chance of actually making a game, because how many parents actually show up to some of the Valley View sporting events that occur during the week?
Yeah, but I agree with what you said before. I mean,
Maybe that
sports
could be
shouldn't be
something
the
we could
bottom
offer.
line.
Maybe we could offer morning, study hall and sports and things.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's something we can.
But I think at the very least, I'm hearing that the board is more in favor of going forward in the direction of seriously considering it, coming up with a better map of what it may look like, and going down that path. So if we can get going, it sounds like the committee was in favor of it too, Mariana?
The committee discussed, yes.
Not
Can't say-
unanimously.
We're not unanimous, obviously.
Okay.
Because that's our committee. But, at that point in time, we needed, according to Steve, to bring it to the full board to make sure he had support to move forward.
So I think you have the
I
support.
mean, he spent a lot of time working on this already, but it'll become significantly more intensive
Yeah.
if
So-
we're going to move forward.
So unless there's a clear objection from a majority of the board, I would say that we have the support. Let's start rolling on getting more and more detail.
So we'll put on the next agenda, and I'm glad Mike's here too, because I know that you have quoted me in the paper since October of 2014 talking about this. So that's a good thing, because we're still out there about it. And we will do some type of a public presentation at the board meeting on the 23rd, giving the pros and cons and just a discussion about it
That's of November,
of November.
when we'll all actually have parents and kids here?
Yep. And then we will,
Well, and maybe
then we
we
will
should,
set meetings.
maybe we should at least mention it before they all leave, so that,
Yeah.
maybe not the whole presentation, but just, because no matter what we do, you could ring every doorbell in town and personally tell them, they'll still say we
I was never told.
Maybe we should make it a bullet point under the superintendent comments.
Yeah, plus I'll have something in the Friday folder saying,
And maybe even
You
a
know, come
blast
to
out
the meeting
there
and talk
with the
about it.
system.
And you could maybe
Not
take
yet
one of
for
the
that, but
sessions
yeah.
at the Parent Academy. You know how we have breakout
Yep.
discussions? Maybe one of the breakout sessions could be that as well.
sure.
Can we get a copy of the report that they sent you?
Which one are you talking, oh,
You don't have a report yet.
we have the draft.
We have a draft report. Well, then we have a copy of the draft.
I mean,
Well, it's different worksheet, Excel worksheet, just with kids
talking about
students
transportation.
and student routes. So we don't have a real good report at this time. It's a lot of routes and stuff.
we're working on that. We'll have something for you on the 23rd.
So on the money savings aspect that we discussed at the meeting too, they gave you a drill down on that, a detail on the Excel sheet?
An estimate.
Not on the Excel sheet, on the fact that you're gonna save on bus routes. And they have an industry standard for how much each route costs. So if you eliminate a route, you save X dollars.
Is that industry standard for New Jersey, or it's a countrywide?
It's a countrywide one, so it's probably even higher here, because everything's higher here. But this is a big operation that works in all across the country.
So
I mean, right now, it's all very preliminary, so.
Yeah.
So prior to the meeting, if you don't mind, maybe getting us with the agenda for the 23rd, if you can get us what the presentation's going to look like, just so we can review it
Sure.
before you get it out. All right, so for other, I've got one quick thing. Veterans Day is on Wednesday. We have two veterans on the board, Don and Michael. Are you considered a veteran, or are you considered a person who has served?
That would
veterans-
be the definition of a veteran.
No, I think sometimes some people say a veteran is somebody who's served in a conflict.
now
veteran of
recognizes
foreign war
it.
there.
Oh, yeah, that would be the,
It's recognized in everybody
Either
who
way?
has.
Well, either way,
You served, you were a veteran.
then I'm happy to say that. Then you guys, I'm appreciative of your service. Thank you. I know that all of us would be. Thank you for doing what you did, and for all those veterans out there as well. So that's my other. Any other comments? Any other? No. All right. So let's open up to public comments. It's 9:24. Any other public? No. All right. We'll close public. The board comments aren't here, but board comments. Any board comments? 9:24. All right. Close. Do we have to go into executive session again?
No.
Oh.
Nice, right?
No way. What? Since you did the woohoo, what do you got? You
I
want
move to adjourn.
I second.
a second from Don? From Carlos?
I know you are used to saying done, and that is.
It was. It's by habit
All
now.
those in favor say woohoo!
All those favor, yay? No, nays, abstentions. It is 9:24. Thank you for coming. Have a good night.
Mike, if you want a special.